Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eaterberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with John Kelly, director of the short film Retirement Plan. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. John Kelly is a filmmaker specializing in animation. He studied at the Royal College of Art in London and lives and works in Dublin, Ireland, where he is developing a number of projects that explore a similar line between tragedy and absurdity, including a feature-length animated documentary. He joins me on the podcast to talk about his animated short Retirement Plan, which he co-wrote with Tara Lawal and was inspired by his own possible midlife crisis. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
So your film centers on our character Ray, a man who is kind of fantasizing about everything he wants to do once he hits retirement, something we all kind of start to do as we enter middle age. How did you go about developing this idea into the film that we see on the screen today?
The idea sort of plopped into my head on a short flight from London to Dublin. I think it's just one of those things, once you kind of cruise past 40, you become aware that maybe you might not have the time to do everything you want to do in life. And I gained this sort of bleak awareness that it wouldn't be possible to achieve everything I wanted to do. So it was sort of this kind of midlife crisis in the form of a film. I was kind of commiserating with myself about how time poor I felt. And it made me think about, what if someone planned their retirement meticulously, but in the process, mortality caught up with them. But like practically speaking, that was just the initial idea. And I worked with my friend Tara, who's an incredible writer. And together we kind of crafted this script. And we got funding from Screen Ireland. In Ireland here, where I'm based, we're lucky enough to have kind of public film funding. And so there's a body called Screen Ireland, and they work with RTE, which is the national broadcaster. And every year they produce, 4 to 5 animated shorts, and we were lucky enough to be selected as part of those.
That's fantastic. And some of the scenes that we see throughout the film, the one that sticks in my mind for some reason is an older version of Ray driving the luggage cart at the airport, I think it is. How many of these kind of situations that we see him in throughout the film are from your own kind of wish list of things to do in retirement?
Yeah, there's a lot of wish fulfillment. From my part, I would love to drive one of those airport vehicle tug things, but that's still on the list, unfortunately.
Sure. Now, I really love the animation style of the film. You have some fairly simple colors and really bold lines, and I feel like that kind of masks the stark reality that the film shows, that we can't, get to everything we really want to do. Tell a bit about kind of why this was the right approach for telling this story in particular.
Yeah, there's a few reasons. I mean, practically speaking, there's like over 100 shots in the film, which is a lot in 7 minutes. So we kind of needed something that was going to be light on its feet to make. So what I love about animation is that the best and worst thing about it is that everything and anything is possible. But we did have to kind of put some shackles on ourselves. So I drew the original scene designs and had the help of 2 amazing animators to bring them to life. But I kind of restricted myself to a simple line style, as you say, and, no moving cameras where possible. But I think like it's also a little bit like I'm interested in a certain area of animation, like adult animation, for grown-ups. I think comic books have gone through a very kind of clear transition to graphic novel with the likes of, Chris Ware and Daniel Clowes and people like that. Whereas adult animation tends to be more in the sitcom sphere, with a few exceptions. And I love I love things like Bob's Burgers and stuff like that, but I think there's also room for something a little bit more naturalistic. Animation my wife would watch. And, I originally trained as a graphic designer, and I think that probably shows through the slightly OCD style. I have to kind of reconcile my drawing style with a love for kind of clean, simple graphics. I was at a conference, an animation festival at the weekend in Ireland, and they had Nick Park from Wallace and Gromit speaking.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, they were talking about Feathers McGraw, this penguin character. And that's someone I reference all the time in doing kind of commissioned work when they try and ask you to make a character more complicated. I just think, less is more. And the simpler a character design, the more that an audience can kind of see themselves in the character and read into it and project on it.
Yeah. And we obviously see a lot of subtle changes in your character Ray as he progresses from scene to scene throughout the film. We kind of mentioned it a little bit at the top, but how much planning went into making that progression of the character. So it's almost unnoticeable as it's happening, but by the end, we see a very stark difference between what we saw at the beginning and the end.
Yeah, from my experience, age kind of sneaks up on you, and I wanted in the film for it to sneak up on the viewer the same way it does for this character Ray. And I think that's another lovely strength of animation is that you can age a character like this. There's kind of a balance because you want it to be subtle, but we also wanted it to hit people. So suddenly he's not able to do, he's, working through a list of all these things he wants to do. And then suddenly things have been fairly say, you're hearing the narration and you're seeing exactly what he's talking about, like camping or whatever. But then suddenly there's a disconnect and there's three lines in particular, I think, where he's kind of saying, I'll travel more, I'll travel more, I'll travel more. And each one, the first one is like he's actually traveling. The next one, he's in a deck chair on the beach. And then the final one is he's much older, this kind of progression of stepped aging. And then the last one, he's on a coach tour, with lots of aged people around him. And it's pretty kind of miserable. But it's a fine line, the misery aspect because we did want it to be funny as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned your narrator there is voiced by Donald Gleason. How did you connect with him? What was it like working with him on this film?
Yeah, it was a total shot in the dark. I didn't know if he'd be interested. I just sent him a video proposal, me talking to camera, which is often the way I kind of pitch my ideas, just because it's a handy way to be able to throw in lots of references. So I did a personalized one of those, sent it to his agent, and he connected with the idea, I suppose. He lives in Dublin, which helps. So we just met for an afternoon at a recording studio, and he did a ton of different versions. And, he's very up for improvising, and a lot of his improvisation is in there. He's very funny. So he was able to add a lot for sure to the script, which is exciting.
Yeah, I've definitely seen his range. My kids love the Peter Rabbit movie that he's in, and obviously we've seen him in things like Star Wars and Ex Machina. So he's got a lot of range
Yeah,
there for sure.
yeah, totally. Yeah, he's so good at comedy and drama, and I think we kind of needed a bit of both in this. So yeah, it's fun.
You mentioned, comedy and drama. Obviously, the film does provide some laughs, but I think some tears as well. And I kind of got the message that I shouldn't be waiting for too late in life to do the things that I want to do. What else do you hope the audience is able to get out of the film as they watch it?
It's interesting, completely unexpected reactions. People kind of have been seeing themselves, or, one friend said, "Oh, I see my own father struggling in retirement." I don't know. I think my favorite work is entertaining, but leaves me thinking afterwards. And I think animation has this amazing ability to be a bit of a Trojan horse for deeper subtexts. You see that in like even that opening sequence of Up, where which is the kind of classic modern example of like how you can weave some really, really deep subject matter into something that carries you along with such momentum. So I only hope that it stays with people a little bit, even a pinch. But I'm happy for people to take what they want from it, really.
Sure. Now, I do have a couple of questions, not specifically related to the film, but before I move on to those, is there anything else you want to touch on about retirement plan?
No, not really. No, I think your questions have covered it nicely. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, this might be the hardest question I ask then, but if you had to pick your top 3 films of all time, what would they be?
It is a hard question. I think like my first impactful cinema experience was 15 years old seeing Fargo, the Coen Brothers film, in biggest cinema in Dublin. And that was just, I kind of didn't know I didn't know anything about the Coen brothers walking in, and then became obsessed afterwards. Worked my way through Raising Arizona and Barton Fink and everything else afterwards. I also loved American Movie. Have you ever seen that documentary?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's two kind of amateur filmmakers on a quest to make an amazing horror. And it's just really lovely tone, and I think I also love, a lot of, it was hard to choose it would be hard to choose my favorite documentaries because I love Crumb and Grey Gardens and stuff like that. But I think the third film would probably be The Jerk, Steve Martin.
Classic.
Classic. Yeah. Just because silly never gets old. I'm trying to figure out how old my kids need to be before I can share it with them, get the sweet spot.
Yeah. Don't want them too young for that one for sure.
I also haven't watched it in years, so I'm not sure. Maybe some of it might not have aged as well as it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
If you could invite any 3 movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why?
Yeah, I think I'd love to spend a dinner with Chauncey Gardner from Being There, Peter Sellers' character. Maybe not Peter Sellers because he didn't sound like such a nice guy, but Chauncey Gardner sounded amazing. Are we open to TV?
Sure, why not?
Characters? Yeah. I mean, it's bored. I think that there's kind of long versions of the episodes, but the dad from Bluey, Bandit, I think just to get some parenting advice, and maybe also again stretching into TV, Fleabag from Fleabag, just because I think she would make any dinner party interesting.
I would love to attend that dinner party. Bandit's a new one on me, but I would love to. I've got a young one who watches a lot of Bluey, so we know Bandit well.
Yeah, it's one of those things like it's the only thing. Someone else said this to me, and it totally resonates. That all 4 of us in our family, we can watch it and all laugh and cry.
Yeah,
and it's the only thing I think that does that.
Yep. Now, do you have any books that you could recommend that you've read recently or really enjoyed? They don't have to be related to movies and could be fiction or nonfiction.
Yeah, I'm mostly drawn to nonfiction. I recently last summer, Mark O'Connell is an Irish writer, writes a lot of nonfiction, and he wrote a thing called A Thread of Violence, which is about this murder case about 30 years ago that completely shook the country. And it's like incredibly intelligently written, but like really funny and thrilling. Would make an amazing animation. I also loved Ed Zwick, the writer-director who wrote, Glory and lots of other things, wrote Hits, Flops, and Other Illusions, which is sort of it's like a really good how-to for directors in terms of directing actors, working with difficult people. It's really gossipy in a nice way, about very famous actors. He clearly doesn't give a shit anymore, which is lovely. But he's also like, a Yale graduate, so he's like super intelligent. I found that great. And another one that was really good, I've only heard the audiobook, but it's Rick Rubin, A Creative Act. I know Rick Rubin's that kind of divides people a little bit. He goes a bit spiritual at times, but as a practical guide to creating, I found it really useful. He sort of gives you permission to do a lot of stuff. And there was a point when I was storyboarding this film and I was doing it linearly and really struggling. I was like, okay, no, I have to do this work from panel 1 to panel 300 or whatever. And I can't skip any. And then I got to a chapter in his book where he was just saying, think out of order. If you want to build a bridge, you've got to build both sides and then it's much easier. Or if you want to make a jigsaw, you've got to put the pieces around it before you put the final piece in. And that was suddenly like, oh yeah. And that it's so obvious, like a lot of these self-help things, but until you actually have the context to use it, it's great.
Excellent. Well, we'll put some links to all those so people can check them out. And who else from the world of film should I have on the podcast?
There's a few, we were talking about adult animation. I think there's a few people that have started making really interesting, and not started, they've been doing it for years, but adult animation, particularly in the US. Joe Bennett, who makes Scavenger's Reign, and also this new series, Common Side Effects. which is incredible. A kind of a thriller based on the pharma industry. So the guys that make that are all kind of pushing the boundaries of animation from where I'm sitting. And I think that's really exciting. They'd be great. And also, I have a friend that makes a YouTube channel called Wheelie Yellow. He's keeping his name secret, but it's basically him with a remote control car and a tiny little puppet that he face tracks animation onto. And he started making it in lockdown and then suddenly got, 600,000 followers on Instagram in the space of a few weeks. And it's ballooned and he's huge on TikTok. But he's one of the funniest people on the planet. I think would be a very good guest.
Super. Well, I'll have to see if we can find out who that is and find his stuff on YouTube. Then lastly, before we wrap up, do you have any other projects lined up? And also, where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, I have about 11 things in progress. Stupid amounts, but I kind of like being spinning plates. One I'm particularly excited about is an animated documentary about a rat. It's sort of part action, part horror, but non-fiction. And I've written a script and storyboard of that, and we're applying for funding again here in Ireland. So hopefully you see that soon. And on Instagram, I'm not really on anything else, and I'm barely on Instagram, but I'm John Kelly, JOHNKELLY _Junior JNR.
But we'll put a link to that as well, and look forward to seeing that next project and other ones when they come out as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, John, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Really appreciated you sharing your film and getting to hear a little bit about what went into making it.
Brilliant. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again to my guest today, John Kelly. His short film, Retirement Plan, won the Grand Jury and Audience Awards at South by Southwest and will be playing at festivals around the world throughout 2025. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eaterberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eaterberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out The Oscar Project online at theoscarproject.substack.com, and be sure to come back for my next episode where I will be chatting with Chris Estrada, the other winner of my Oscar prediction contest. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.